Yeah, that's the good stuff right here. Hard, soft literature. Yeah. I mean, sort of, kind of. I tell you what, I'll I'll check it out. You know, I'm not normally one to destroy books, but I'm just kind of big for it. Hiya folks, Shootin' Doggy here to do another book discussion. This one's a little bit different than normal though, because basically you're getting a 3-for-1 deal. This is a book series I read quite a while ago, but I remember the general events well enough and my overall impression I'm gonna give my normal discussion. But this is a series I found all at once in a bookstore. 3 hardbacks, a complete trilogy, and I've done plenty of book shopping, used bookstores throughout the time, and that's a very rare find. So when I saw this, I was tickled pink. I was over the moon to find a complete trilogy, you know, all at once at a very good price. And if you've been keeping up with this series, excuse me, then you'll know that I tend to buy books books from a series piecemeal randomly. Just that looks interesting, I'll give it a shot. Though more recently I've stopped doing that because it just isn't a beneficial thing. It winds up with me either excuse me, finding myself in a book series that I do like, but I've read them completely out of order and kind of screwed it all up, or I get introduced to a book series that I don't have any interest in, and it's just not very beneficial. So I prefer reading a complete work just in a single book from a reader's perspective anymore. But anyways, actually jumping into the series, it is what's called Fool's Gold, and it is by Jude Fisher, not Judy, sorry. And the first one is Sorcery Rising. And what I'll be doing is going through the book's summary and its basic information through each one, and then I'll discuss the entire work. But anyways, starting with Sorcery Rising, the summary is: Katla Aronson, daughter of a merchant from the island nation of Era, has come to her first All Fair. It's an annual tradition, and many of the diverse peoples of Elda gather at the All Fair, setting aside their differences to trade and interact. Katla has heard about the All Fair for as long as she can remember, and she has been unable to sleep for sheer anticipation. Even the location of the All Fair, the Moonfell Plain, is a place out of legend. For the Moonfell Plain, a neutral territory, though it technically lies within the boundaries of the Istrian Empire, Era's ancient enemy, is home to a sacred mount, a hallowed but contested ground. For the Arans, it is called Sur's Castle, the place where their god, the monarch of the sea, first surveyed his worldly domain. The Arans believe that Sur views both men and women equally and welcomes both onto his holy ground. But the Istrians have a different tale to tell. For them, the mount is Fala's Rock, the holy place of their vengeful fire goddess. The Istrians, who shroud their women in concealing garments and deny them many of the freedoms of life, believe that for any female other than their goddess to set foot on Fala's Rock is the deepest desecration, a capital offense. Katla, though still young, has come to the All Fair not merely to enjoy herself, but to ply her trade, for she is a master knife maker, the greatest blade forger in all of Era. But she is also a compulsive rock climber and can feel the land around her even when she is aboard ship, for she has an inborn magical affinity with the natural elements of the earth, stone and metal, which imbue both her trade and her hobby with preternatural skill. And I will just mention briefly that nobody else in her family seems to display this trait, and I can't even really remember anybody else in the story having this sort of trait either. So just thought I'd mention that. Proud to the point of arrogance, rebelliously willful and strong-minded, yet naive about the religious fanaticism of the Istrians, Katla secretly climbs the holy mount at dawn on her first day at the All Fair. Unfortunately, her sacrilege is observed by Istrian elders, who swear to catch this blasphemous young woman and put her to death. but her brazen and ill-considered act is also witnessed by young and idealistic Istrian nobleman Saro Vingo, who is awed by Katla's strength, beauty, and daring. He has never before seen a northern woman he is instantly smitten. While Istrian officials search for the offending young woman among the tens of their longtime enemies, and Katla cuts and dyes her long red hair to avoid detection, far stranger events are afoot at the Allfair. For the caravans at the Footloose, sorceress nomads shelter a mysterious albino man who sells maps of sanctuary, an Arctic fortress thought to exist only in myth, and draws to him people who secretly yearn for danger. But this enigmatic man has an ulterior motive, and he also harbors two sorcerous entities: an unimaginably beautiful woman with no memory who inspires unquenchable lust in any man who sees her, and a black cat within whom is hidden many of the world's greatest magical secrets. And before the Allfair is over, forces will be set in motion which will threaten every country, every people, and perhaps change the entire face of Alda forever. And that has to be one of the longest book summaries I have ever read. It is a little long-winded, and it honestly summarizes the first several dozen pages out of this book that's just shy of 470 pages. And this first book out of the series was published 2002, and I believe they go in sequential order: 2002, 2003, 2004. But with that such a long book summary, I guess I will cover a brief part of this book from my memory, because with my memory of the series, they all sort of bleed together, and I don't remember exactly where they start and stop at this point. But I will say that with the first book, I was pretty interested and engaged as I read through it. I enjoyed the main character, the female lead. She was impulsive. She was definitely, I thought, very foolish and foolhardy, but with how a lot of fantasy novels go, that wasn't really outside of the norm. That seemed fairly standard. And it does, well, actually, ironically, her events tie into that pale albino man with the magical entities, because basically the two of them kind of set off a domino chain that goes well beyond what you'd ever think and causes all kinds of chaos. And I will admit that with the two groups of people, the Arans, who in my best summary or stereotype would fall into what I think of like Nordic people, Vikings. They live in more frigid environments. They're known for their sailing, metalwork, and they're more kind of a stout people. And then, is it Istrians? Okay, darn it. Istrians. I'm pretty sure it's Istrians. Yep, Istrians. It mentioned in the summary how the women have to be completely sealed and wear concealing garments, and I don't think that was unintentional. Again, this first book was published in 2002, i.e. shortly after the 9/11 event in 2001. So I have to think that Jude Fisher was borrowing, and again writing this intentionally, that Istrians are basically Muslims. That is how I interpreted their culture. It does come off as slightly Arabic. The women are wearing basically burqas. Unless you are a woman's spouse, you will never see her in anything less than a complete burqa. Only the eyes would ever be seen. Otherwise, they eat. Their environment seems to be not exactly arid, but less frigid, less of the kind of cool areas. They I don't know, perhaps because after a certain point I just associated them with Muslims and the Arabic culture. It just seemed like everything I read just doubled down on that and held that more firmly. But yeah, the first book, one of the things that I would say is a detriment is it basically takes multiple people's perspectives. So it has the main female lead. There's the albino man and his ulterior motives, what he's trying to accomplish. There is other family members of the main female lead. They have their own perspectives, things, their ambitions and goals, like her father, who is trying to sell off his wares at the All Fair, keep her in line, save her as she is being persecuted for climbing the mountainside. And then he also gets caught up. This is where kind of the name of the series, Fool's Gold, comes in, because that albino man was selling maps to a theoretical treasure trove, and he winds up becoming obsessed with it. The Istrian man who stumbles across the Katla, he basically falls in love at first sight. He's entranced by her, and he becomes he has a main storyline. I felt like in the first book his wasn't as prominent, but then towards the end he stands out more and more. And though this story wasn't perfect, I thought it was interesting, and I was definitely curious what they were gonna build up with her, because it's pretty clear that there is a degree of magic in this world, but it's not well developed, it's not commonplace. And I guess I should also mention that the wandering nomads, they're almost treated as just a people group, and so they don't exactly have their own perspective, but they are mentioned quite a bit throughout multiple people's stories. And they basically are almost like a group just to be subjugated. They aren't really a threat or bother to anybody, but at least under the Istrians, they are greatly persecuted and attacked. Not so much through this book, but later on through the series, they suffer a lot, and for no real good reason.